Hello, I'm Adrian Penfold, and I'm here with Louise Wyman, who's just given a talk at the Oxford Planning Law Conference on titled "Big and Beautiful," which was dealing with the role that public realm and landscape plays in creating great developments, and has shown us some wonderful slides, beautiful slides, of some developments around the world, some of which she's been involved in, and some of which not. I'm going to ask a few questions and try and develop some of the points that she's been making, and some of the points that came up in a really interesting Q&A session that we had after the talk. So, first of all, Louise, hello.
Hello, great to be here.
One of the things that came to my mind, and I've been thinking about more generally on some of the work that I've been doing recently, is it? I was going to say, how do you regulate through planning for quality? But I suppose it's almost more basic than that. Can you regulate through planning to create very high quality developments of the sort that you've been showing us? Can planning do that in itself, or does it need a bit more than planning? Does it need a great client commitment of that sort? And most of those developments did have great clients of one sort or another. Is it possible for what one might call sort of bog standard housing development to reach not necessarily those levels, but the sorts of levels that we all think are appropriate for people to live in and to work in?
That's a great question. For me, and I trained as a master planner, so I think the role of the planning system is twofold, actually. One is in the forward planning, and that's where you do need to work with the right partners, great designers, start with the landscape, which is kind of the argument that I've been trying to build today. So there's the visioning piece of planning, if you like, the sort of forward-looking piece. And then the part that our development control system obviously plays is then the regulatory. Did you do what you planned to do? So for me it's twofold. And what I've tried to advocate for today is the investment in those early stages of thinking about complex sites. Today we've been talking about kind of big new opportunities. We referenced Ebbsfleet, we looked at Northstowe. We've looked at some of the work that people like Urban Civic have been doing in Alconbury and Rugby, and these are kind of government-endorsed, funded projects. And in my career, the ones that have been successful have had the upfront investment in relationships, in kind of understanding of the site, really getting the ecology, what's going on in the kind of ecological systems, but also the community ecology, if you like. Who are these new homes going to be for? The Rugby radio station's a great example of that, where it's kind of an annex to the town of Rugby, but how do you make sure it doesn't become a different place? How does it enhance Rugby? So we were looking through the talk, I hope, at some of examples of kind of enhanced nature and its relationship to the city. So I think we're probably not putting enough emphasis within the English planning system on that kind of creative end of the planning process, if you like, the early stage stuff. And if you get that right, and if you do put the time in, the resource and the kind of energy and the creativity into that, then the regulatory function, which is sort of part of your question, is more of a process, and a process of checking that what the development team said they would do at the outset is what they do as the programme of development happens. And I just think we've probably lost some of the pieces of that kind of continuum in the last 20 years or so that I've been working in large-scale planning.
Two questions that occurred to me off the back of that. Well, one, do local authorities actually have the resources? I mean, I agree with what you've said about that. It's very difficult, I think, to retrieve a situation when you get to the development management stage if you haven't done that work up front on the visioning and the master planning and all of that. But so do local authorities have the resources, the capabilities, the people in-house, or able to bring in people to do that sort of work? Question one. And question two is, having done that sort of work, how do you make sure it sticks, that someone doesn't come along and says, well, that's all very nice, but I can't afford to do that and provide 35% affordable housing and do this, and it's just not possible on viability terms?
So to answer your first question, I feel desperately kind of concern for local authorities, actually, because their resources have been eroded across the board. I don't think there are many examples where this hasn't happened. So, and I now work in a combined authority, which is a combination of 18 local authorities in the West Midlands. We don't have planning powers of the combined authority, but we're trying to bring our kind of convening and educating and skills building our sort of ability to those 18 local authorities. So the first answer to your question, are the resources in the local authorities? No, they've been taken out, and that's a fact, for reasons we understand.
Could the combined authority play a role? I mean,
Yes.
I suspect you don't have the numbers of people who could really get stuck into that. But would it be a good idea if you did, and you could support the local authorities?
I think so. I mean, that's in the way I worked in Ebbsfleet. Actually, again, we went into Ebbsfleet as a development corporation in that case, so another government body. We had Dartford and Gravesend as two planning authorities. Yeah. The development corporation didn't have the visioning powers, if you like, the forward-looking powers. Those plans were in place because at the point the Development Corporation was set up, the local plans were approved, the 11,000 homes were consented, the rail was in or coming in. But the role there of the Development Corporation, so again a big body, not a huge body, 30-odd people, was to top up local authority skills, if you like, with a corporation's skills. That's how we were able to secure the Healthy New Town status. That's how we were able to fund some of the bridges, the pathways, the stuff we've been talking about, the amazing kind of programme of health and well-being that is very visible in Ebbsfleet now. There's a design team there that leads something called Edible Ebbsfleet. So people are growing vegetables in, allotment-style gardens. There's stuff actually happening at the station. There's sort of these sleeper raised beds, what I would call raised beds, that are growing veg, so kids getting on the train or commuters coming home can kind of pick up fresh veg, literally with zero kind of air miles. And these small touch things, we've given kids Fitbits, so that they can get to understand that if you scooter to school, as opposed to getting your mum's car or whatever, you're going to be burning calories and you can eat a bit more, or we're trying to through doing small as well as the sort of big moves, change the kind of way that we live in cities. We had a great debate, I thought, about healthy environments from the first speaker today, and there's a real keenness, I would say, across whether it's a combined authority or a development corporation or a future new town body, to work in a much more joined up way, in a much more kind of long-term healthy way.
So that second part of my question, can you make that vision stick at the development management stage?
That's where, so it's sort of carrot and stick, isn't it, with planning, I think, maybe that's what we're saying. So the carrot is get the creative people together, put the resources in, but the real power, and this hasn't been taken away from local authorities, the enormous power and value in granting planning permission. That's when the exponential in terms of value kicks in. And I think we've underplayed how much power planning committees have. And I've sat on planning committees and I've seen the arguments and the debates that go on. But I think we probably need to do a bit more work around the kind of power of the planning committee within a local authority, because that's when you unlock the vision that you want to consent. And then there has to be some way, I think, of making sure, go back to your point of, is the great vision then delivered, alongside the planning consenting moment, which is the kind of moment of power, if you like, for the public sector. You need to plug in your regulatory processes, and people sign up to that. I think you could do some kind of performance agreement very easily with the developer to say these are the milestones. We're monitoring you through this process, that vision that you promised us when we were having the kind of creative carrot bit. We don't want to be the stick, but we want to make sure that we get, for the benefit of the community, what we were offered. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. and it's a huge topic and a really interesting one, and I'd be very happy to spend a lot more time talking about it, but unfortunately we've run out of time. So just to say thank you once again for doing the talk and for doing this podcast.
Thank you for your time.